Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoyed this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. What do we do now? Asked the paramedic, looking at the pregnant Caesarean. Except the pregnancy is a little tight. There may be complications, irritatedly muttered his colleague. Who in our country could perform such an operation? Jacob, the chief doctor in the infirmary, frowned. The doctors assembled in the ward began to avert their eyes. It's not like they go to the women's colony to gain experience or to stretch their skills. This is a gathering place for those who have nowhere else to go. Mediocre therapists who were only good enough to give a pill for a headache. Jacob grimaced again, realizing the deplorable situation. He looked completely alien to the bums gathered in the infirmary. Tall, slender, with a straight and confident face. The man had expressive facial features, clearly defined eyebrows under eyes that seemed deep and serious. He always wore a perfectly white robe, which gave the doctor added credibility and respect from those around him. When Jacob spoke, his voice sounded calm, convincing. He had a clear mind and could find the right arguments in an argument. He was also a good listener. Despite his busy time at the women's colony, the man always remained friendly and attentive to his patients. He knew how to comfort, to give hope for recovery. Overall, his appearance displayed both high professional qualities and a deep love for his work. So no one understood what such a man forgot in the local backwater. I would have done it myself. Not a specialty, Jacob muttered, twirling a pen in his hands. Ideally, the prisoner should have been taken to a civilian hospital, where a professional would have taken care of her. But, as was usually the case, at the most crucial moment, the only transport was out of order. The medical loaf, at least somehow equipped to transport the bedridden patients, refused to start, and taking a pregnant woman in an ordinary car was too risky. What was there to say? The chief of the housekeeping service did not see to the condition of the car in time, and there were no spare parts on hand, and the orders from the city would have had to wait a few more days. So what are we going to do? Mickey's voice was heard. The warden entered the infirmary, giving everyone a stern look. He too was a tall, massive man with broad shoulders. His oval face was furrowed with wrinkles, but it still retained the strong features that betrayed an iron character. A neat, black mustache gave him an unflappable, mysterious look. Mickey never parted with his black uniform, which emphasized his power and authority. The colony warden's voice was deep and charismatic, a way of speaking that made him simple enough for everyone to understand, but persuasive enough to make even the laziest act. It was not our fault. Transportation is always provided for in such cases. You made the rules yourself, Jacob shot back. Oh, I see. Let's not blame each other. There isn't time. If the prisoner can't be transported to the city, someone from the obstetrics department or surgery will go to her. Do you think they would do that? Jacob asks. They don't have much choice either. The news came to the city hospital, of course, and was not greeted with enthusiasm at all. The staff was already understaffed. The corridors were jammed with line, and here it was required for a whole day to allocate a specialist, stopping the reception of citizens. The chief doctor swore into the tube. Could not it be brought in advance? Such a case knew that you cannot cope with yourself. You understand the specifics of the contingent, and they are criminals. How, in your opinion, should they have kept all this time near the usual patients or allocated a separate room with guards? Dr. Mickey sassed the doctor. Great. And how do you propose to carry out a Caesarean operation in your quarters? The chief doctor said, realizing he was wrong. We have rooms with normal equipment, sterile and suitable for such procedures, but we have no specialists, or we could do it without you. And which of the doctors would agree to work in your institution? The chief doctor snapped again. For the duration of the operation, we will provide guards. I need an hour to coordinate, said the doctor. Mickey answered half an hour and hung up. You're going to tell me what to do? Shouted the doctor into the machine. The manner of speaking to the warden made him angry. The straightforward clerk did not want to compromise, not thinking at all about other people's difficulties. Not only would it be necessary to tear a specialist away from his patients, but he also had to give him a driver's transport, write out a travel card, travel allowances for special condition. One trip required so much paperwork that even to think about it was boring. And God forbid something happens, we would have to pay the insurance for the injured. At that moment, the image of the hated employee, who had drunk a lot of blood out of him, flashed before the chief physician's mental gaze. The most squeamish, out-of-touch surgeon they had on staff. He was the one they could have thrown into the grenade, and he could have done both good and bad. If the fool gets hurt and goes on sick leave, it would be great. And if he resigned after such an adventure, it was only a dream. The chief physician sighed. The old restraint smiled smugly. In general, it would be enough just to teach the rascal a lesson. For the sake of such a thing, even a car with a personal chauffeur could be allocated. Archie, come in here a minute. I have an important assignment for you, he muttered, dialing the employee's number. Yes, very important. Only you can do it. Hello, said Mickey. And don't be disdainful, replied the surgeon. Although Archie was a lousy surgeon, he was a short man with a bald head. He had short, thick arms with dark hair on his bones. The doctor spoke carelessly and quickly, as if he was afraid his words would vanish into thin air if he didn't have time to say them. His face was not all right either. Skeptical of any patient, as if he didn't have a person in front of him but a sack of rags. After his treatments, people began to feel even worse, or even died unexpectedly from the side effects. Here's her chart, Jacob answered dryly, holding out a stack of their forms. The city surgeon nervously snatched up the outstretched documents, plunging into his reading. With each passing moment, his text furrowed his eyebrows higher and higher, until finally the man exhaled carelessly, tossing the sheets back onto the table. Are you idiots? He asked rudely. I was told to just deliver a baby, not perform a miracle with 2 forks and a blunt knife. And all because he had practically no experience and no real practice. A relative of a wealthy businessman, he was in fact only considered a doctor quite late in life, having bought a diploma as a working surgeon. In fact, the man was simply taking a warm seat by transferring from the internist department to get double pay. On top of everything else, tests on the laboring woman showed that she had a poor blood count. It didn't take a medical genius to figure out how a botched operation could end. The head doctor of the old roof must have decided to get rid of me this way, freeing up a position for his nephew, thought Archie. If the girl dies on the operating table, the surgeon who performed the operation would be the first to take the blame. The clinic would suffer a reputational blow. But who's going to be upset about the death of another prisoner? They'll apologize. They'll hold a few fundraisers, and that's it. You want to find a scapegoat? No, thank you. Anyway, I don't want any part of this charade, Archie said. Do whatever you want. Do we just wait for it to blow up in our faces? Jacob raised an eyebrow. Call a chopper. Have them take her to the neighborhood and take care of her. What about the pain she's in now? Give her a sedative. What do I care? Archie threw in. She's pregnant. What do you think would happen to the fetus if you gave her some serious medication? What do I care? The town surgeon said again. They sent an assistant. Mickey sighed. The warden was, to put it mildly, in shock. He was a rather cynical man himself who could be tough when the occasion demanded it. But the city's indifference was astounding. Perhaps he could have been pressured into doing his duty to the patient. But how long would it have taken? And if that prisoner died on the table, that's a real emergency. A serious inspection would inevitably follow. That would pin criminal negligence on the warden. Hell, who knew the unit commander wouldn't see to it that the loaf was repaired? Get demoted to privates and then get fired. But first the problem had to be solved. In addition to the unfortunate girl could die and 3 unborn babies. And if the life of the Harrison Society did not care, then the death of children is sure to shake the masses not indifferent. What was to be done? Tiredly azzled Nicky. Archie sprawled indifferently in his chair. Jacob sat on the edge of the table, thinking intensely. There was a deep silence in the room. Only the old light bulb beneath the ceiling rumbled low. "There is one possibility," said the colony's chief medical officer grudgingly. "There's a village not far from here, Seattle. An ex-military doctor lives there. He's retired, but he's tough. Not even 60 yet. A real professional. Old school. Yeah, I heard something about the warden rubbing it in. They say he pulled so many soldiers from the other side of the world and operated almost in a trench. He's not afraid of anything. I don't care if it's local." "I don't care," answered Archie. The city surgeon stood up and then headed for the exit, demonstratively slamming the front door loudly. No one went to see him off. He was too unpleasant. "I used to know he had a success rate of about 99. Jacob said quietly. "Maybe it's that doctor," answered the warden. "All right, let's see if we can get him here." "Or maybe you got pinched," Byron answered, seeing the car with the colony employees on the doorstep. A man of medium height, silver with hair and a mustache. He had a lean build and an attractive face with expressive features. Blue eyes radiated calmness and confidence. Byron held his back proudly, straight as if he was always ready for action. There was a slight smile on his face, which showed his kindness and sensitivity. The man's appearance was a combination of austerity and delicacy. He still wore a military tunic with stars on his epaulettes and insignia. In spite of his age, his clothes looked impeccable under fire and clean. As always, the military doctor kept a leather bag under his arm, in which he carried his documents and medical instruments, the most important things for this man. "Will you help me?" Jacob interjected. "There are 4 lives at stake. We can't do it without you. But why not, to shake up the old days?" Byron grinned broadly. It took them literally half an hour to reach the colony. Despite the bad roads, the driver tried to bring the valuable specialist as quickly as possible. It was worth it when he stopped. The military doctor was immediately taken to the sanitary unit near the colony to be placed in a clean robe. And then he was sent straight to the infirmary. "Wow." That's all Byron said when he saw the woman in labor. She was lying on the bed, her white covers gleaming muted against the gray wall of the infirmary. Alice was very young, but being in the colony could not but leave an imprint on her face. It was withdrawn, tense, and haggard. Her dark hair, a disheveled wave, scattered across the pillow of her huge belly, and clearly indicated that she was expecting a triplet. Her skin was as pale as paper. She seemed to have exhausted the last of her vitality in anticipation of surgery. Well, well, well. "I haven't had to deliver a baby yet. The war is a different contingent, but I think we can handle it." "Yes, Mommy," the military doctor said soothingly. A faint smile appeared on Alice's lips as a sign that she was ready to fight to the end for the sake of her children. The sight of such a complicated pregnancy did not seem to frighten her in the slightest. Byron was only forced to gather his thoughts. The war had taught him a lot, and here, in a civilian setting, Angela's operation didn't seem so scary at all. With a sigh, Byron estimated what it might take for a C-section. Then he clarified all the necessary details with Jacob, with whom he drew up a rough plan of operation. The military doctor listed all the necessary tools and equipment that needed to be prepared, then briefly told the assistants what should be done on his command. Only making sure that he was completely ready, Byron nodded, ordered to prepare Alice for the procedure. "Well, my dove, we'll do it," quietly the man asked, gently touching the hand of the future mother. "Yes, it seems," weakly answered the patient. "Perfect," said the military doctor. His smile gave her a calm and reassuring countenance, which was much needed around her now. "Let's begin." The man waved to the assembled assistants. Byron slowly but confidently began the procedure. I consulted the other doctors about each step as I went along. The process didn't move quickly, but in the end, all 3 babies were born without complication. It was a little embarrassing. After all, for the first time, the military doctor did all the necessary checks, assuring me that the children were completely healthy. Only then did he announce the end of the operation. "Congratulations, Mommy. Now you have 3 healthy babies," smiled Byron. "Thank you." Alice exhaled. She was finally able to relax and fall into a deep sleep. She needed time to recover her strength. "You're a real hero," Jacob said as he met the military doctor on his way out of the room. "I'm just doing my job, that's all," the man shrugged. "What have you got there?" "Some of Alice's things," answered the head doctor. The infirmary shook the transparent bag. At the bottom of it gleamed a massive gold cross. Military doctor looked closely and immediately shuddered. The decoration was clearly handmade with a very nice pattern, discernible even through the bag. A rare thing, and Byron was sure he'd seen it on someone else entirely. "Is everything all right?" Jacob asked, surprised at the doctor's strange interest. "Yes, everything's fine," Byron brushed it off. He shook off the obsession. "May I speak to the warden, please?" "Sure, he's in his office." Walking down the corridor, the military doctor found the right door, which was slightly open through the gap formed. The interior was well visible, reflecting the inner state of the owner. The walls were painted in calm tones, and the furniture, though rustic, looked quite sturdy and practical. Stacks of books and documents stood on a wide desk, and a bookcase by the opposite wall was stuffed with personal papers. "Permission," proclaimed Byron after a short knock. Yes, of course, our savior." "Welcome, come on in." The warden stood up from his desk. "Just wanted to let you know that the patient is doing well. I've made recommendations to your staff for rehabilitation. The body's young, it'll pull through. We'll do a great job, and we'll do it in the best way possible." "Thank you for your help." Mickey thankfully shook the military doctor's hand and then offered to take a seat in the visitor's chair. "If there's anything we can do to thank you," the chief began. "Nothing," Byron shook his head. "I took an oath after all. Tell me, what's going to happen to the children?" "The usual, as long as the mother serves her time. The children will be sent to the house. Alice has a good chance of parole, so if she wants them, she can have them later." "What if somebody adopts them first?" Mickey just threw up his hands in silence. "We can't stop that from happening. And maybe it's for the best. Why would the kids need a single mother with time on her hands?" Byron didn't answer. He was thinking about something of his own. The warden was in no hurry to ask, either, giving the visitor a chance to collect his thoughts. "Tell me, can't I take the children for foster care?" "Do not worry. My wife and I live a good life. We have a farm, cows, everything of our own. We'll feed the little ones. We'll get them up on their feet. It's better than being on the government payroll." Byron raised his eyebrow in surprise. "But you say something? What are you tortured in your old age?" "They are not puppies." "How old are you?" 50 or 60. "What do you need 3 kids for? It's not like I'm taking them away. When the mother gets out of jail, I'll put them back in foster care." "That's not a conversation." "But you don't care what happens to them, as long as you get rid of them. Why do you have to interfere? Who's stopping you? For God's sake, just do the paperwork like everyone else. When the guardianship gives the go-ahead, you can come back then." "All right, thank you." Byron nodded. I wish someone would give me a lift to the village. Probably missed all the buses. Once home, the military doctor carefully hung the bag on a nail and began to wash his hands. Memories of the glorious past flashed before his eyes. Just a few years ago, seemingly so little and so long ago, At the same time, an old front-line comrade had died of his wounds right in his arms. There on his chest and hung the same cross handmade with such a primitive pattern. But how could a relic get to a woman in labor? That is simply impossible. The old friend's body, along with the cross, was sent back home to be buried humanely in the family plot of the cemetery. There was simply no one to remove the cross. And who would want to steal the body of a fallen soldier? Everybody respected that man, and Byron owed him his life. After all, he had rescued the army doctor from the shelling. But how is it going there? Angela approached. The woman was a tall, stout hostess with a lush figure. The sharp, expressive facial features gave off a confident woman in love, a voice that was always deep, beautiful, and calm. She was attractive, strong, and irresistible, and just like her husband, with whom they had lived soul to soul for many years. So that was it. The military doctor finished his story. He told his wife everything about the children, about the cross and his intention to get custody. She only nodded without asking too many questions. No discussion was necessary. The couple had no children of their own, so maybe now they could do a good deed. I just need to talk to this Alice after surgery. She immediately lost consciousness, and then they took me home. I couldn't wait there for days after that. He was still wondering where the woman in labor got the cross. It couldn't have been a coincidence. Some time passed. It took a lot more effort to gather all the necessary documents than initially thought. Custody reluctantly trusted the man. At least the old connections helped. Yes, impeccable credentials from all places of service. In the end, Byron was given the necessary permits, and the man went straight to juvie. Well, you're welcome. Respectfully, shook his head when he saw the stack of signed forms. I'm sorry about last time I said some things. I really respect you. You're a man of your word, and now I see you're serious. It's nothing. You just give the order to prepare children for adoption. The military doctor nodded. And one more thing. I would like to see their mother. How is she? All right. She's on the mend and she's working again. Now a couple of calls. You can go to the conference room in the meantime. The assistant chief escorted him to a separate room. The room was sparsely furnished with only a table and 2 chairs and no other furniture at all. The tiny window was shut tightly, and a dim mortuary lamp hung from the ceiling. Hello, Alice spoke softly as the guards led her into the room. Hello, little dove. Byron smiled. She shuffled from foot to foot at the entrance, as if afraid to come any closer. Don't be shy, sit down. Mickey said we could talk as long as we needed to. What do you want to talk about? Asked the prisoner, timidly approaching the table. But first, how did it come to this life? It turned out that Alice got behind bars because of stupidity, and not even on his own. She worked as a waitress. She made ends meet, but was generally happy with her life. An honest job. Tiny but her own apartment. But then one day some rich guy started hitting on her. At first it was just courting, flowers and gifts. But Alice immediately realized what it was all about. It is clear that the spoiled rich man is not accustomed to rejection. And when the girl once again ignored him, the bastard decided to take revenge. The poor girl ruined her hard-earned life. After another dinner at the restaurant, Rich accused Alice of theft, and the administration immediately took his side so as not to inflame the scandal. The poor girl was not only kicked out of work, but also put in jail. The restaurant owner turned a blind eye to the fact that the wallet was brazenly planted in the locker of a former employee. She got pregnant here, trusted a conveyor belt. He was wooing her too, saying nice things, showing signs of attention. And then, when everything happened, it turned out that he was married. It turns out cheated, took advantage of gullibility, and I fell for it like a fool. Sadly sighed Alice. That scoundrel, Byron exclaimed. Isn't he punished? No, he hasn't. As soon as he found out that I was pregnant, he immediately moved to another colony, I think, to the other end of the country. God forbid his wife should recognize him. I have no luck with men, or I don't know how to choose. I don't know what to say. They were quiet for a while. It's never easy to bring up the past. But Byron could not leave the mystery of the cross alone. Alice, feeling grateful to her Savior, told her everything without concealment. You know in your gut that he would not interrogate her without a reason. Well, how did you get that cross? Did the military doctor point it out to you? I don't know. Alice shrugged her shoulders. I grew up in an orphanage. I've had it since birth. I'm surprised no one stole it. I don't think so, Byron muttered. I guess the situation hadn't gotten any clearer. How long have you got, then? Not long now. Especially since I'm entitled to parole as a mother of many children. I'll be out soon. Look, don't worry so much when you come in. I got them in my custody. I'll keep an eye on them. Really? Elsie exclaimed in surprise. Yes, everything is ready. Today I'll take away. Oh, how nice. I was so afraid for them. They are just babies. And I don't even have milk. No one in the colony will buy them formula milk. I'll send you a letter and money for the journey. There's a direct bus to the village of Seattle. Thank you. I'll pay you back later for the groceries you buy. I'll work it off, don't you doubt it. Not everything is measured in money. Weird, of course. But you remind me a lot of someone. That's why I'm helping. I have a debt to him, answered the doctor, remembering his fallen comrade. Thank you anyway. After this meeting, everything went as planned by Byron. Alice went to await release, and he took the children from the orphanage without unnecessary problems. The little ones reacted calmly to the move. They immediately pulled themselves closer to Byron, as if they were his relatives and grandchildren. Angela was also happy about the new addition. After all, she had dreamed of having children for a long time. At the doctor's request, Mickey facilitated an early parole, or in less than a year, he would have finished serving his sentence. Well, hello there, little dove, Byron exclaimed cheerfully as he saw her come out of the gate. Hello. She knew from the letter that the children were doing well. The military doctor had even sent her some pictures of happy hullabaloo, which felt quite comfortable in their new home. Now the young mother could finally see them in person. After all, Angela insisted that she live with them for a while until she could get back on her feet. I really don't feel comfortable. You have done so much already, Alice said. She didn't have a lot of things. As they had arrested her in the restaurant the other day, they hadn't allowed her to take anything. They must have been in a hurry to carry out the sentence so there wouldn't be any sudden defenders. Don't talk nonsense. Everything is comfortable for the baby, and we are like family already. Are we going to chase their mother out into the street with pretense and sternness? Said Byron. They waited for the right bus and settled on the seat. The driver accepted the payment, frowning at the freed prisoner. All the locals knew that if a stranger got on at this stop, it was likely that she had just been released from the penal colony. Besides, it was easy to tell the recent one apart. They behaved too wildly, unused to being free, and they were still afraid of the strict wardens. Hello, Byron. A woman's voice was heard, and the military doctor turned around to greet his neighbor who was driving from the city market, holding full bags of groceries. She was an elderly woman who always did everything modestly and cut her hair short, covered with gray. She was of medium height, with an unjuvenated face covered with fine wrinkles. Her appearance was simple but solid. After all, Claudia was tacitly considered the village chief. There was no practical use for this title, but if someone wanted to know the latest news or solve any problem, then for some reason he went first to her. Hi, how have you been? Yes, I just got into town. And you, woman? She looked at Alice. The experienced eye of the village head immediately identified the former prisoner, and now the woman could not wait to find out more. What was the relationship between the military doctor and the young criminal? I met a relative. She is coming to visit us. Clava was not at all embarrassed by her guest. Can't you see she's embarrassed? We'll talk later, Byron brushed her off. But later, so later, you could see by the woman's face that the future neighborhood was not to her liking. What if she was a thief, or worse? But the doctor's stern look made the woman bite her tongue. After all, Byron was a respected man who had more than once helped his fellow villagers. City doctors had to wait for hours, or even days. Slowly but surely, the bus arrived in the village. The headmistress went silently to her room, and Byron, ignoring the old gossip girl, took Alice to the new house. "This is my wife, Angela. Meet," he said, making guests. "Pleased to meet you. Come in, don't be shy. Now we're going to have lunch." The woman started bustling around immediately. "I'm not hungry, don't bother," she answered embarrassedly. "We have been on the road for so long." Yes, and the public speeches, I suppose, missed the home food. It was simply impossible to resist the charm of the hostess of the house. While the food warmed up, Alice impatiently walked into the nursery. Seeing at last her babies, she was very worried that the crumbs did not recognize her. But Carapuzzi joyfully smiled, as if all this time has not passed. "Hello, my dear," Mother exhaled. "They'll be walking soon," Byron said quietly. "They're really big." In fact, she was incredibly excited to start a new life in a quiet and peaceful place. A new beginning seemed to be waiting for her. And finally, she would be able to get rid of the burden of her past life. Byron's house was large, and the owners welcomed the young mother and her children. And Alice was very welcome. After all, she was modest, industrious, and clever. She gradually began to settle in the new place, helping the doctor's wife at home, and looking for work in parallel. However, it was not so easy. No one wanted to take the position of the former, especially with the stigma of a thief. Alice tried to tell her employers how it really was, saying that she was framed, but no one wanted to listen. But the most unpleasant thing was not even this. Over time, Alice noticed that her neighbors were always whispering behind her back, and she suspiciously looked behind her. At first, she thought they were just wary of newcomers. But after a while, she learned that everyone discusses her sentence, considers her a cheater, and is completely unwilling to communicate with a person, a recent prisoner. Okay, the employer, but the locals. This threw the young mother into despondency. Could it be that after serving time for a crime she did not commit, she would now have to carry this burden on her for the rest of her life? Why couldn't she start all over again, forgetting all the horrors of her past life? She tried to make friends with her neighbors, to show them what she really was. She followed all the rules and was polite. However, the villagers never gave up, refusing to accept the stranger into their tight-knit collective. "She's gone again," said Claudia angrily, glancing at her. "What for, I ask you?" said her friend. "Now, what on earth is all this about?" strictly asked the military doctor, having heard the gossip. The man worked from Sadovaya near the house just behind the fence, near which their common bench with the headman stood. "Why accept a thief here? She is young. She has already served her time in her old age. She brought into the house someone she did not understand, and with children too. She must be some kind of crook. And Angela was spinning you and sat on your neck. That beauty doesn't work. She just wanders back and forth between three heads. Bullshit. If you don't know, don't open your mouth." Byron got angry. The woman's friend kept quiet, not wanting to quarrel with the only doctor in the village. The headman, on the other hand, was getting quite angry. "Are you sure she's not deceiving you? She's got her trust in you tomorrow. She'll wait till you're distracted and clap. Don't you dare say things like that." Alice, an honest girl. "Just unlucky in life. You're the only one you meet." Claudia gasped in indignation, but the military doctor had no intention of continuing the quarrel. Spitting on the old gossip, he quit his job and went into the house, not wanting to listen. The man was quite sure of his decision and never once regretted that he had decided to help the unhappy woman. But the quarrel with the headman did not go in vain. The villagers gradually turned to outright harassment. When they met, they attributed the disappearance of the old things and simply did not give them a pass. Insulted Claudia constantly said rumors, which were happy to discuss all the villagers. Alice, feeling all this pressure, grew sadder every day. Life for her was no sugar at all. The apartment she received from the orphanage had long since been resold to the state. Her only corner to nestle in was Byron's house. If it weren't for the kids, but going off to an unknown place. With 3 little ones in her arms, it was scary. The military doctor, too, could not find his place, seeing how innocent Alice was suffering. He tried in every way to support her, helped her in word and deed, suggested that he pay no attention to silly gossip. But he himself understood that his words had little effect on the situation. The man even tried to argue with his fellow villagers, but only aggravated people's dislike of her. As a result, their attacks crossed all boundaries. After another harassment, Alice, with tears in her eyes, decided to run away, leaving all his residents behind. She did not say anything to the owners not to disturb them. But to live in the hated village at least one more day was above the strength of the fragile Alice. Running with the children was not easy. But she had a special stroller for building. Under the suspicious glances of her fellow villagers, she left the village, proudly heading for the city highway. Alice did not feel guilty at all. She just didn't want to be a constant object of their attacks. Right. There you go. Suddenly Claudia shouted after her. She must have noticed Alice's bags and correctly interpreted her attempt to leave the village. You know that you're just an old witch, snapped Alice, feeling the accumulation of resentment, demanding a way out. What have I done to you? Why do you dislike me so much? Because people like you will never get anything good in life. Orphans, thieves. She also turned our doctor into a wolf. Now she's looking at everybody. You should have stayed in your own town. What are you doing here with your puppies? Alice opened her mouth to answer, but suddenly realized that none of her words will not reach her heart without a sensual old lady. She realized that Claudia could never understand her, no matter how much time it took to explain. The former prisoner only sighed sadly as she continued on her way toward the track. Nothing to say. Right. That's it. We don't need people like that here. But Alice let another insult pass her lips. It seems that the decision to leave was the most correct in recent times. It was easy on the soul, and the future was no longer seen in gloomy colors. After all, life was always going to be full of people ready to shout nasty things. But that should by no means hinder or stop her. Alice stepped onto the highway, approaching a bus stop. Buses sometimes stopped here, and it was easier to catch a ride. She had to wait about half an hour before the first car appeared on the horizon. It was expensive, solid. Alice shrugged shakily, remembering how her past relationship with the rich man had ended. But the children were beginning to whimper, so she raised her hand, drawing attention. "Hello. Can you give me a ride into town?" she asked the driver. It turned out to be a handsome man. "Sure. Sit down, nice," smiled the driver. "Only I have children," nodded at the wheelchair Alice. "And not much money." She leaned into her bag, looking for her purse. A chain with a cross slipped around her neck, and a golden relic bobbed in the air. "Oops," said Alice, adjusting the cross. "Wait." Suddenly the rich man stopped her. He cannot believe the staring at the relic and literally stunned. Trembling fingers unbuttoned the collar of his shirt and then pulled out exactly the same cross. "Where did you get it?" Alice shyly muttered. "Where did you get it?" "I think my mother gave it to me before she gave it to the orphanage. I don't know what the reason was, but I want to believe that she couldn't have done otherwise." "Okay then. And this is where you happen to live?" Alice stepped up her nose and, not knowing why, began to tell her story herself. The driver opened the door for her and sat her down in the car to listen carefully. Once in the warmth, the children immediately fell asleep. She recounted how she ended up in prison, got pregnant, then she met Byron. She wanted to start a new life, but she couldn't settle down in the village. Alice herself did not know why she laid it all out in front of the first man she met. Apparently, the accumulated sadness needed an outlet, and the man was a good listener. "And where are we going now?" he asked. His name was Alexander, and he was passing through Seattle almost by accident on business. "I don't know, but I can't stay there anymore." Alice sobbed. "So let's not cut it short. Let's go to your doctor. I want to discuss something with him." It was very hard to go back to the village. But Alexander insisted, and the children were tired. Now running away to nowhere was no longer such a tempting idea. Indeed, what was she going to do? Being in the city, no work, no housing. Money was tight, and she had 3 babies in her arms. They drove straight to Byron's house. The doctor and Angela immediately found themselves on the street, excitedly running up to the car. "Alice, where do you think you're going?" Byron, meanwhile, frowned at Alexander, guessing whether the guest brought bad news. "Hello?" The driver said hello. "I've brought your missing things. I also want to ask you something else." The rich man carefully took out a cross from under his shirt and showed it to his host. The military doctor's eyebrows went up. His face immediately softened. Okay, one relic at a young mother, but the second, and moreover from a random encounter on the road fellow traveler. Could there be such coincidences? "How did you get it?" Byron began. "It is a long story." At this point, Alexander warned him. "Come on, let's go inside." "What are you standing outside for?" Angela shouted sternly at everyone. She picked up the children, took Alice with her, and once again shouted at the men not to linger on the doorstep. "Who the hell else is here?" Suddenly, a disgruntled voice of Claudia was heard. The headman stealthily went out on his porch, eagerly watching what was happening. Her return did not make her happy at all. The expensive car in which the girl had been brought awakened an evil curiosity. "Go, witch. You're not in the mood for another fight right now." The whole company gathered in the large room. Alice was ashamed of her hasty decision. Awkward in front of the good-natured host to shelter her and her children. Angela bustled around the guests, placing a steaming cup of fragrant tea in front of each. Alexander seated himself at the head of the table, examining the rustic dwelling. Everyone was silent, not knowing how to start a conversation, until the military doctor coughed, drawing attention. "Okay. The first time I saw a cross like that on my old front. Line comrade." Alexander listened intently to Byron's story. But at the end, when the doctor told of his friend's death, it seemed that the rich man harbored a secret hope, which in the end did not come true. After listening to the master of the house, he sighed again, taking out his cross. The story, as I said, is long and a bit confusing, and I can hardly figure it out myself. The man paused, pondering how best to begin the narrative. There were 3 of us, me, my older brother Oliver, and our little sister Rose. And when we were very young, we were in an orphanage. We were 2. Rich began to tell how hard it was for them to grow up in those early years. Frontline friend of a military doctor. And Alice's mother turned out to be a sibling of Alexandra, whose parents gave them up. But before that, they gave them these object crosses, custom-made by the best craftsmen in town. We lived in this boarding school for several years, but then there was a fire. Almost all the documents burned. It was impossible to find the end. All the children were sent away indiscriminately in a hurry, so we all ended up in different parts of the country. Only these crosses remained as a reminder that we once had a family, Alexander said sadly. The rich man firmly believed that the relics were given to them for a reason. Their parents had specially ordered them, giving them to their children as a parting gift, so that they could always find each other. The man never forgot, kept the cross, and as soon as he was able to get a good position in life, began to look for traces of his lost relatives. But a lot of time had passed. Children have grown up, left each other. Nevertheless, Alexander managed to find a master jeweler, now deceased, who once made jewelry. The jeweler's son met the rich man and told him that he knew about the secret of the relics. It turned out that our father had ordered the crosses in memory of his wife, our mother, who had died in childbirth. He did not want to give us up. He loved us with all his heart, but was forced to flee abroad, hiding from the persecution of law enforcement agencies. It was a dark story there, too. It turned out that our family was wealthy, so there were detractors who wrote an anonymous denunciation. The time was old, dashing. The authorities reacted immediately, taking the newest man into circulation. Alexander told the story of his family, with sincere sadness in his voice. It was obvious that he had never been able to let go of the past, hoping to restore at least a piece of his family name. It was a pity that too much time had passed. The older brother, judging from Byron's story, was dead. Yes, and a sister of Alice's mother is also missing. So it turns out that of the whole family, you're the only one I have left. Sadly smiled Rich Man, taking Alice's hand. All in their places now. And this to me, all the place in the house enough. Do not even doubt. I'll provide everything you will not need and will not let anyone else hurt. Don't be silly. Alice was embarrassed. Do not even argue. At least let me at an old age to be with my family. I never had a wife or kids of my own. Never met the very niece. Now he will be the only daughter of blood. How will we share grandchildren? Angela spoke from the kitchen. And they are like family to us now, too. Come and visit at any time. And in the summer, we will send them to you from the city to frolic in nature. Alexander smiled. At these words, Byron's face softened. Frankly speaking, he was worried whether the rich man would allow them to see the children whom they sincerely loved with all their hearts. But Alexander gave the impression of an understanding and kind man who was not afraid to give up his dear little ones for upbringing. In the end, everything really fell into place. Gathering up her simple belongings, Alice left for the city with her uncle. Fortunately, he lived just outside Seattle. Rich Man with all my heart fell in love with his niece and her children, taking care of them and providing them with everything they needed. Through his connections, the man found out who framed Alice in the restaurant and forced to write a confession about what he had done. Time spent behind bars was not returned. But at least the honest name of the people was cleared from the shameful stigma that the poor girl did not deserve at all. Life was beginning to get back on track. It's been a long time since we've had a visit, Angela said, looking out the window. It was just last week. Byron shrugged it off. You think it's easy with 3 kids driving back and forth? I miss them. Wouldn't let them go anywhere. My wife sighed. You're too hearty. Though you do not look like that, the man smiled. Everything is all right with us. Don't be greedy, Byron said. He was unspeakably happy to have his family around, and even more glad to be able to return the debt to an old frontline friend whose niece he had saved, though accidentally bumping into her after all these years. One day Alice went for a walk with the little ones in the park near the house. They lived in a very nice green neighborhood, which was fenced in not without Alexander's efforts. The rich man always dreamed that his descendants would walk the streets that he had created with his own hand. Alice tried to get out of the house more often to spend quiet and relaxed time with her children in the fresh air. Quickly becoming accustomed to the countryside, she could no longer do without the singing birds, the singing scent, the flowers. At the same time, a young boy stopped by the park for his lunch break, choosing a communal bench covered in the shade of the trees. The young man had seen her here several times before and began to take an interest in the pretty stranger. She seemed nice in some peculiar way, different from all the other people in the park. Probably too kind and nice for this glowing around. The money town. Today their paths strangely crossed, pushing a stroller in front of her. Where the 3, Alice approached the bench, peering into the tree crowns. Hello, said Tom, smiling. Alice shuddered a little, surprised at the attention of a little slowly, but still decided to answer with the same kind smile. Hi, how are you doing? To tell the truth, it was not the first time she too had noticed a handsome young man working in an office nearby. He looked young, energetic, medium height, fair, and neat face gave him a cheerful, almost boyish look in a good sense of the word. There was a subtle soulfulness in his green eyes, and his smile couldn't help but attract the attention of those around him. Tom stood out from the others with his blonde beads, his hair always pleasant, smelled of a good perfume, wore a neat hairdo. His office suit, consisting of a shirt with dark pants, complemented the image favorably, making the young man even more attractive. From time to time, Alice caught the guy's glances and answered him with light smiles, noting the peculiar manner of movement and slight excitement of the stranger. She began to think more and more often about what a reliable partner and friend this man could be. "Would you like to keep me company? Tired of eating alone?" Tom nodded at his sandwiches and a cup of coffee. "There's a lot of us. Sometimes we can even be noisy," Alice smiled lovingly, looking at her little ones. "That's all right. Children are the flowers of life." She sat down on the bench and the young people began to talk on different topics, feeling a mutual sympathy. Alice began to talk about her life with her children, and Tom, in turn, told about the wisdom of their work and hobbies. So quietly, almost an hour flew by. "Unfortunately, I have to go. I hope to see you tomorrow," he said. He got up from his seat. "It was a pleasure to meet you." They said their goodbyes and the young mother went home, feeling that the casual conversation had awakened a feeling in her soul that had long been forgotten. Breaking up with Tom was not something she wanted to do at all, so she was determined to meet him at the same time and the next day. Their walks continued for several more weeks, until finally Tom asked her out on a real date. They arranged to meet the following week at a cozy restaurant near Uncle Newhouse. "Tom, I want you to know before anything serious comes up, I have kids. I will never give them up." Whatever happened, Alice warned, it was true. Babies were her whole world, and she couldn't imagine any personal happiness without them. "I told you before, children are the flowers of life. How could you not love someone so much like you?" Tom answered. In the end, Alice began to feel that the sudden companion was the very person who understood her, shared her thoughts and feelings. Tom, in turn, was happy that he finally found a sincere woman not obsessed only with material things. The guy was really happy and even managed to genuinely love the funny toddlers, with whom the young mother practically did not part. Thus began their love. Things gradually began to get better. Alice and Tom's life was filled with bright colors, with smiles of home comfort. They lived each day enjoying each other, no longer thinking about the past and not afraid of the future. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked the story, please support me with a thumbs up button. It's one click for you, and it means a lot to me. Thank you in advance. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.